Describing your neighborhood, English listening practice. Hello and welcome to English Listening Time. Today, we're going to talk about describing your neighborhood. This is a great topic to help you practice everyday English vocabulary and improve your listening skills. Let's get started. When you think about your neighborhood, what comes to mind? Is it the place where you've lived for many years, or perhaps a new area you've just moved to? No matter where you live, your neighborhood is an important part of your daily life. It's where you start and end each day, where you meet your friends, and where you feel at home. Let's explore all the different aspects of a neighborhood and learn how to describe them in English. First, let's talk about the location of your neighborhood. Where is it? Is it in the city center, in the suburbs, or maybe in a small town? My neighborhood is in a quiet suburb, about 20 minutes from the city center by bus.
It's not too far from the hustle and bustle of the city, but it's far enough to feel peaceful and relaxed. Now, let's think about the types of buildings in your neighborhood. What do they look like? In my area, there's a mix of different housing types. There are some apartment buildings, usually about 4 or 5 stories tall. These buildings are home to many families and young professionals. There are also lots of single-family houses with small gardens in front. Some of these houses are quite old, maybe 50 or 60 years old, while others are newer and more modern. The streets in my neighborhood are wide and lined with trees. In the spring and summer, these trees are full of green leaves, providing shade and making the area look very pretty. In the fall, the leaves turn orange and red before falling to the ground. It's always a beautiful sight to see. One of the things I love most about my neighborhood is the local park. It's not very big, but it's a great place to relax and enjoy nature. There's a small playground for children, with swings and a slide. On weekends, you can often see families having picnics on the grass. There's also a walking path that goes around the park. Many people use this path for jogging or walking their dogs. Speaking of dogs, pets are very common in my neighborhood. Many families have dogs or cats, and you can often see people walking their dogs in the evenings. It's a nice way to meet your neighbors and have a friendly chat. Let's talk about the people who live in the neighborhood. My area is quite diverse, with people of different ages and backgrounds. There are young couples starting families, older people who have lived here for many years, and everything in between. This mix of people makes the neighborhood feel vibrant and interesting. Now, what about the facilities and services in your neighborhood? These are the things that make daily life convenient.
In my area, we have a small shopping center with a supermarket, a pharmacy, and a few other stores. It's very handy to have these shops nearby for everyday needs. There's also a local library, which is a great resource for the community. People of all ages use the library to borrow books, use computers, or study quietly. The librarians are always friendly and helpful, ready to assist you in finding what you need. For families with children, there's an elementary school within walking distance. You can often hear the sound of children playing during recess times. It's a cheerful noise that adds to the lively atmosphere of the neighborhood. Transportation is an important aspect of any neighborhood. How do people get around in your area? In my neighborhood, there are several bus stops, making it easy to travel to other parts of the city. Many people also use bicycles, and there are bike lanes on some of the main roads.
For those who drive, there's usually enough parking on the streets or in driveways. Let's talk about the atmosphere of the neighborhood. How does it feel to live there? My area has a friendly, community-oriented vibe. Neighbors often greet each other when they meet on the street. There's a sense that people look out for one another, which makes it feel safe and welcoming. One of the nice things about my neighborhood is how quiet it is at night. After about 9 or 10 p.m., the streets become very peaceful. This makes it easy to get a good night's sleep, which is important for everyone. Now, what about the weather in your neighborhood? The climate can have a big impact on daily life and the overall feel of an area. In my neighborhood, we experience all 4 seasons. Summers are warm and sunny, perfect for outdoor activities. Fall brings cooler temperatures and beautiful colors. Winters can be cold and snowy, but it's always pretty to see the snow-covered streets and houses. Spring is a favorite time for many, with flowers blooming and trees coming back to life after the winter. Let's consider the sounds you might hear in your neighborhood. What noises are common? In my area, you can often hear birds singing in the morning. During the day, there might be the distant sound of lawnmowers as people tend to their gardens. Occasionally, you might hear children laughing and playing, or the bark of a dog. These sounds create the soundtrack of daily life in the neighborhood. Food is an important part of any community. What kind of food options are available in your neighborhood? In my area, there are a few small restaurants and cafes. There's a cozy coffee shop where many locals go for their morning coffee. There's also a family-run pizzeria that's been in the neighborhood for years. It's a popular spot for Friday night dinners. One thing that brings the community together is local events.
In my neighborhood, there's a small farmers market every Saturday morning. Local farmers and artisans come to sell fresh produce, homemade bread, and handcrafted items. It's a great place to buy fresh food and also to catch up with neighbors. Let's talk about how the neighborhood changes throughout the day. In the early morning, you'll see people heading off to work or school. The streets are busier, with more cars and people walking to bus stops. By mid-morning, things quiet down a bit. You might see parents with young children at the playground or elderly residents taking a morning walk. Lunchtime brings a bit more activity, with some people returning home for lunch or visiting the local cafes. The afternoon is often quieter again, until the early evening when people return from work. This is when you'll see more people out and about, walking dogs, jogging, or heading to the shops for last-minute groceries. Weekends have a different rhythm.
Saturday mornings are busy with people doing errands or heading to the farmer's market. Afternoons might be quieter, with people relaxing at home or in the park. Sundays are usually the most relaxed day, with a slower pace and less traffic. Now, let's consider how your neighborhood might be changing over time. Are there any new developments or improvements happening? In my area, there's been some positive change in recent years. The local council has been improving the sidewalks, making them wider and more accessible for people with strollers or wheelchairs. They've also added more streetlights, which has made the area feel safer at night. There's also been a trend of people renovating older houses. It's interesting to see how some of the older homes are being updated with modern features, while still keeping their original charm. This mix of old and new adds character to the neighborhood. What about green spaces in your neighborhood? Besides the park I mentioned earlier, there are also small gardens in front of many houses. Some people take great pride in their gardens, planting colorful flowers or well-tended vegetable patches. These little green spaces help make the neighborhood feel fresh and alive. Let's talk about the sense of community in your neighborhood. How do people interact with each other? In my area, there's a community center where various activities take place. There are classes for different interests, like yoga or painting. There's also a community bulletin board where people can post notices about local events or services. One of the nice things about my neighborhood is how people help each other out. For example, if someone is going on vacation, their neighbors might offer to water their plants or keep an eye on their house. This kind of neighborly support makes the area feel like a real community. Now, let's consider the history of your neighborhood. How long has it been around? What changes has it seen? My area was first developed about 70 years ago, originally as a suburb for workers in the nearby factories. Over time, as the city has grown and changed, so has the neighborhood. The factories have mostly closed now, and many of the residents work in offices or other types of jobs in the city. You can see the history of the neighborhood in some of the older buildings. There's a small church that's been here since the beginning, and some of the original houses are still standing, although many have been renovated over the years. Let's talk about safety in your neighborhood. How secure do people feel? In my area, there's a general feeling of safety. People feel comfortable walking around, even in the evening. There's a local police station nearby, and sometimes you see police officers patrolling on foot or in cars. This visible presence helps people feel protected. Now, what about the cleanliness of your neighborhood? How well maintained are the public spaces? In my area, there's a good system for garbage collection, with regular pickups twice a week. There are also public trash bins in the park and along the main streets. Most residents take pride in keeping their properties tidy, which contributes to the overall cleanliness of the neighborhood. Let's consider the cost of living in your neighborhood. Is it an expensive area to live in? My neighborhood is considered middle range in terms of cost. It's not the most expensive part of the city, but it's also not the cheapest. The mix of housing options means that there are places to suit different budgets, from smaller apartments to larger family homes. Now, let's talk about the local businesses in your neighborhood. Besides the shops I mentioned earlier, are there any other interesting places? In my area, there's a small bookstore that's been here for many years. It's a cozy place with a great selection of books, and the owner is always happy to recommend something based on your interests. There's also a small art gallery that showcases work by local artists. These unique businesses add character to the neighborhood and make it feel special. As we come to the end of our description, let's think about what makes your neighborhood unique. What are the things that give it its special character? For my area, I think it's the combination of the friendly community, the mix of old and new buildings, and the green spaces that make it stand out. It's a place where you can feel connected to your neighbors, but also have your own space. In conclusion, describing your neighborhood is a great way to practice English and think about the place where you live in a new way. Your neighborhood is more than just a collection of buildings and streets. It's a community, a home, and a part of your daily life. Whether you live in a busy city center, a quiet suburb like mine, or a rural area, your neighborhood has its own unique features and atmosphere. I hope this description has given you some ideas about how to talk about your own neighborhood in English. Remember, the more you practice describing familiar things like your local area, the more comfortable you'll become with everyday English vocabulary. Thank you for listening to English Listening Time. Keep practicing, and don't forget to notice the details of your own neighborhood. You might be surprised at how much there is to describe. Good luck with your English learning journey.